Looks like we are live. Hello, everyone, once again. Welcome to this edition of Factually Yours, a webinar series for trainers of the Google News Initiative India Training Network. My name is Surbi Malik, and I'm the program director for this network working for Internews. Joining me for this session today is OSINT expert Eoghan Sweeney, who will lead the session. I also have with me Surbi Pandit Nangia from the Data Leads team. Hi, Surbi. Surbi, do you mind unmuting yourself? We can't hear you.
Hi everyone.
Hi. We also have with us Shivali, who's the assistant editor for the Data Leads team and part of our partners for the program. Topic for the session today is power tips to help you keep your verification knowledge and material updated. And leading the session today will be the very awesome Eoghan Sweeney. Before Eoghan takes over, just a quick, heads up on the tech part of it. All of you are watching us on YouTube live, which means you will be seeing all of us talk. But if you need to interact with us, you need to give us your questions on the YouTube link. You will see a live chat window on the right-hand side of your YouTube screen. That's where you can key in your questions, and I'll direct them. I'll be the director and direct them to Owen for him to answer those for you. We'll also have a Q&A session at the end of the session. So if you're taking notes, if you miss on asking something between, you will still have time at the end of the session to do this. From here, I would hand over to Owen. Owen, over to you now.
Hi, so can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, today is going to be, I would say, something of a housekeeping session because there are lots of skills we teach. There are lots of ways in which we do it. But the one question that I get over and over again, and the one request that I get really often is people saying, my exercises, my materials are a little bit out of date. Can you help me find new ones? And of course, yes, I could do this, but obviously we have networks spanning right across the Asia Pacific region. And one of the things I've been thinking recently is what I want to do is help people, empower people to be able to do this for themselves, or at least maybe even together. I'll talk about that a little bit more later. So I want to run people through the simple practices and techniques and ways that I dig up fresh materials, and hopefully give people that ability to do it and not to be constantly worrying that what they've got is out of date or irrelevant or not working or whatever. So I put together some slides and we'll go through these, and please at any stage, if you have any questions, either put them, as Surbi said, just type them in, or hang on to them and we'll get to them at the end. I'm always happy to answer any and all questions. So have we got it now?
Yes, I think we have.
We have the presentation front page.
Right.
Okay, thank you very much. Apologies for the slight lag on that. So what we're talking about here is keeping your materials fresh, making sure that you don't have things that are obsolete, that are superseded by better and other techniques and so on. And obviously the two questions for this are, why do you need to do this? And then how do you actually do it? So the why is very important. Why would you need to be updating your training materials? Well, obviously there's a question of credibility. You know, when you want to get the trust and the attention of an audience, you need to know that your material is, at least most of the time, topical, that it's reasonably up to date. And also it can be very helpful if it's locally relevant. I don't think that always needs to be the case, but I think it certainly helps to have at least something in there that an audience has a kind of familiarity with and can see that, oh, this is actually relevant to my situation, to my environment, and so on. However, I will say one thing, that if you have good training material, it is good training material. And it's not necessarily always desirable or always crucial to have things that are topical and local. If it's good, you know, you need to ask yourself this question: is this piece of material effective in achieving the training objectives? Is this piece of material effective in getting people to learn and embed the skills of geolocation, of source analysis, of tracking down originals, of doing debunks. And if you think that that is a very effective piece of material for doing that, don't toss it out just for the sake of updating. I've seen people, very, very good trainers and very good organizations, who are still from time to time using material that's several years old. I've done it myself, simply because it is very good. It does get the job done. You don't need to be making things new just for the sake of newness. This is one thing that I fretted over for the first few months, maybe even year or so, when I started training, is not to fall into what I refer to as the familiarity trap. We've all been there, where we're using this piece of material and we've used it in 10 training sessions before, and we have become thoroughly bored with it. And we've done it so many times that it seems old, it seems stale. But again, sit back and try to look at it objectively and ask yourself, is it good? And if it's good, it's good. Don't forget that you may be seeing it for the 10th or the 20th or the 40th time. Your audience, in all likelihood, is seeing it for the first time. I've put stuff up on screen and I've had to almost force myself to sound enthusiastic because I know the piece so well. You know, the saying, familiarity breeds contempt. And yet I catch the reactions on the faces and the eyes of audiences who are wowed by this. And just because you're familiar with it does not mean anybody else is. So from time to time, sit back and look at things and say, you know, if I were looking at this for the first time, or how did I react when I saw this for the first time? Don't think that it's stale or old just because you're fed up with it. There are risks, though, when you're using material that gets a little bit old. And the longer something is online, the more you start to worry about, well, what if it's taken down? What if it doesn't work the way it used to? When I say things don't work, there are a few reasons for that, which I will go into. Now, if the material no longer exists and almost inevitably something you're using and something you're quite attached to and something you like to use regularly in a workshop will at some point disappear. I've seen this happen not only with content. I had a situation a few years ago where the geolocated tweets function in Twitter, which I believe they're taking away altogether now, but at the time, I went to demonstrate it to a group of trainees, and it was down for maintenance literally for 20 minutes, and literally at the very moment that I was trying to teach people about it. So be prepared for this kind of thing to happen. The same thing can happen with videos. The same thing can happen with photos. You can be really familiar with them. You can really enjoy teaching them. To me, I think that often increases the chance that they're going to disappear. So with disappearances, I've seen this happen over and over again. You know, there are many reasons why something may no longer be available to you. It could be that the person who uploaded it isn't happy with it. Maybe it has personal information they don't want to give out there. Maybe they just think it's not a very good photo or video and they remove it. Maybe they go offline entirely. Maybe they let their account lapse and it gets shut down or whatever. But individuals, as I say, can take their stuff offline. Also, platforms can take things offline. There are, again, numerous reasons why a platform may take something offline. It could be for a copyright infringement. It could be that it infringes on their rules and best practices on, you know, objectionable content or so on. It could have been subject to a takedown request from somewhere else. And we have seen that done maliciously as well. We've seen it done with videos of atrocities and things like that, where there have been concerted efforts to get things removed. And suddenly something becomes unavailable, something you were depending on and that you thought was really useful and really important. Now, apart from things being taken down, things could stay online, but there could be changes in the environment in which a photo or a video was shot that could now make them impossible, or at least much more difficult to use as an exercise. I'll give you an example here. This is a video that was shot some years ago in Syria, and it was a protest during which the crowd set fire to a statue of the former Syrian leader Hafiz al-Assad. Now, it was one that I used quite a lot in exercises for my groups, partly because it was an interesting video anyway, but also because it was quite a good video to use as a geolocation exercise. As you can see what I've marked here, one of the things that helps you to pick out the location of this, once you have homed in on the region and the general area where the video was shot, if you get to this area, on the satellite photo, you can see that zigzag pattern down the bottom there of the video, down the bottom of this screen grab. You can see there's a kind of zigzag pattern going around the place where the statue is located. That's early on. That's shown in the first few seconds of the video. You can see on the bottom left, it says just 3 seconds in. And the person shooting this video then panned around and showed other parts of it. And you can see here a very distinctive pavilion type structure with this kind of double roofed structure on it. There are also a group of flagpoles. There are tall trees. There may be poplars. I'm not sure. I'm not a botanist, but there are tall, quite distinctive, narrow trees also. And that's just over a minute into the video. Now, around the time that that video was uploaded, these were very, very helpful for ascertaining the location, because once you homed in on that area and you went to Google Earth and got this satellite view, you can see very clearly there, you can see the zigzag pattern going around the edges of where the statue is located. And then exactly, if you're standing where that person was to the left of that with the camera, and you know that they're to the left because you can see that large building on the right in the background, then to the left of the camera person, you can see the pavilion and the shadows of the trees and the shadows of the flagpoles. Now, this was excellent in terms of geolocation. This video was shot in an area called Tabqa, which was a strategically important area because there's a large dam there that produces a lot of energy. The area was subsequently controlled by Islamic State militants and was then the location of a very big battle to root them out of that area. And following the battle, the more recent views, the more recent satellite views of this area look like this. Now, as you can see, there's been huge destruction done there. You can still see the zigzag pattern. Whether you would have been able to zoom in on this area is questionable. You can see the remains of the pavilion, but of course you can see that it's got that double roof. And the building on the right that helped you to orient your view of the scene has been completely obliterated. Now, this doesn't mean that this is entirely useless. It could be that if you were working with a group of advanced trainees, that you could get them to start looking into historical imagery, because with this on Google Earth, which is what I did to create this slide, you go back to an earlier view, you will then get the better view. But if you had been using this with a relatively novice group or inexperienced group, this would make it extremely difficult for them to geolocate. So keep an eye out for things changing like that. As I say, keep it, be aware that if it has changed, but not too much, it then may be of use to you as a more advanced exercise. But this would have put it way beyond the reach of a lot of the people I was training at the time. Now, of course, as I say, it's almost like Murphy's Law, that things will go wrong if they can, and they'll probably go wrong at the worst possible time. So I obsessively check the materials that I use, both the materials I use for examples, the ones I use for case studies, the ones that I use for exercises. I obsessively check them in the week before a workshop, the day before a workshop, and if at all possibly in the hours before a workshop, because you need to be prepared. So try to check them as close to the time that you're actually using them as possible. Of course, if something does disappear an hour before you're due to use it, it can be a bit of a nightmare, and it can be very important then in that case that you have something to use as backup. Of course, it's very important to have more than you actually think you'll need, because the ones that you think you're going to use will quite possibly disappear. Having backups, it sounds very straightforward. It's not, obviously, because it does take a bit of work to build up these little libraries. How do we go about doing that? Now, this sounds like common sense, but the main points I would say: searches, number one, if you're doing a lot of this stuff by yourself, and also consider collaboration. There are growing numbers of us working in this field. Many of us, like this group who I'm talking to today, working within the same network. And if we're constantly searching individually for this stuff, we're going to end up duplicating efforts, wasting resources. I think there's huge space for us to help each other out, because particularly with these kind of networks that I work with, the people in those networks are not going to be training the same groups of trainees. They're going to be working exclusively from each other. So there's no need to worry that you're going to be giving the same group the same material again and again. You're spread out over a large region, over different groups, and it's pretty much always going to be exclusive to each other. So searches. When you're looking for content, obviously the big four are these: YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. But increasingly, there are many, many more. There are so many different ways you could be looking for content. What kind of things should you be searching for? Well, of course, using keywords, referring to incidents. And the thing you're looking for is the kind of incident that you would expect to be visually striking. Something that is likely to provide imagery. So things like I have here as an example: fire, protest, flood. There are dozens, there may be hundreds of these kind of things. Think of any visually compelling news stories you've seen recently and make lists of the kind of keywords that you think you could use to find content related to these. And don't forget, use your own language. Use whatever the local language is. If you hear of something going on in South America, go to Google Translate or whatever. Use Spanish, use Portuguese. It's not that difficult. Then you could use catch-all terms, things like breaking. Now, I know that will bring back an awful lot of garbage. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Words like hoax and debunk. And you can search through all these platforms one by one, but I always think Twitter is probably your best starting point. It's particularly useful because you will get things surfacing on Twitter from other platforms. If you're searching through tweets, you're not only going to get Twitter native video and Twitter native photos, you're going to get people tweeting things that they saw on YouTube, on Instagram, and many, many other places. So Twitter is a very good, almost I would say, a clearinghouse for this kind of thing. Excuse me. And as I say to people so many times, in terms with news monitoring, with news discovery, with all this kind of thing, consider using TweetDeck. I'm a huge fan of TweetDeck. I think it's an amazingly powerful tool when used well, and it can be used, and I do use it, for digging out material for training also. So here's just a very simple example. This is not a particularly sophisticated example. Please feel free to expand on it, to use your imagination, to do it in other ways. But if you set up a search, and here are a few terms that are related to possibly visually rich news incidents: fire, flood, flooding. Don't forget to vary the parts of speech, particularly if you're using English. Protest, demonstration, explosion, and so on. All of these things are likely to be related to news stories or incidents with a visual dimension to them. You can then go, and as I said, rather than just going to Twitter, twitter.com, you can then go to TweetDeck, and you can set up a column that you can use as an ongoing or persistent search for these kind of things. You can leave it open in your TweetDeck, let it reload, check it from time to time. And I've hit those little, you see on the top right corner of this, you've got the little handles there for the filters. The filters in TweetDeck are amazing. You can do so much with them. And this shows you where I have put in the actual search, matching fire or flood or flooding and so on. Now, if you put in something like that, you will quickly see what I refer to often as a Twitter fall. Just lots and lots of things scrolling past in your TweetDeck column way faster than you can deal with them. But what are we looking for here? We're looking for content. One of the things that you can do with these filters is where it says tweet content, you click on that and it gives you this drop down. At the moment, it's set to all tweets. One of the things I've highlighted here, you could have tweets with any media. You could just have tweets with images or tweets with videos. This will obviously root out an awful lot of the tweets that are simply referring to the incident, and will cut it down to images and or videos. Now, of course, you're going to miss things in this way, but you know, at this point, you're not actually trying to report on these stories. You're just trying to get good, compelling content. So narrowing it down and cutting out a huge amount of the false positives is very, very beneficial.
Also, I think to a fact checker and a fact checking trainer, using all of these operators really saves them a lot of time, which is precious when you're trying to do fact checking, or even if you're going for a training for that matter, prepping a day, or a week before.
Absolutely. Anywhere that you can create shortcuts and save time when you're preparing numerous workshops and so on, anything like that is going to be a help to you. So when you do find good material, when you do get a great video of a flood or a fire or whatever else, and you have tested it out and checked to see that you can verify it, make sure that it does actually work the way that you expected it to. And it can be terrible if you go into a workshop and you think that this was verified in a certain way, and suddenly you realize there's an important piece of information missing. Also, as I say here, make sure that you remember how to solve it, because if you have a particularly complex or difficult, worthwhile one, you may actually forget how you went about solving it. And it can be great to do it live again during workshop, but what you don't want to end up with is actually not being able to repeat it. So it could be worth noting it down, reminding yourself, oh, I saw this thing happening, and then I checked something else, and this is the process I went through to solve this. Because it's nice to actually have the answer key before you hand out the questions. I mentioned searching, but what I also want to bring up is the idea of collaboration. If you're in a network, like many of the people who I've conducted training workshops with, make use of that network. This particular group has been a great example of that. There's an extremely prolific chat group in which people get stuck in and drop each other tips, ask each other questions, answer questions, and so on. And it's an amazing feat of collaboration, because I know that a lot of the people that we have in this training network, or pretty much all, are from competing news outlets and competing organizations. And there was initially skepticism from all directions as to whether people would collaborate with each other. And I don't think there was ever any browbeating of people or insisting that they collaborate. I think it's something that came naturally because people realized that there was far more to be gained than lost through this. So I think it was a hugely beneficial experience for everybody involved, and can continue to be so. Of course, if you are collaborating in this way, please do try to contribute as well as consume. I say share and share alike. If you do find something, don't keep it under your hat. Try to share it with the people with whom you're collaborating. Now, here's an idea that I think is worth considering for people. If you are in a collaborative group, it can be good to have, as I say, a chat channel. Now, chat channels, one of the things about them is they can be very busy. They can be a huge mix of stuff, and that stuff can scroll by pretty quickly if you're not actually keeping an eye on it. So if you do get together with several people or many people, and you do want to start putting together a little library of good training materials, one of the ways in which you could do this is to set up a spreadsheet or a document. I particularly like spreadsheets for this because you can keep the important features apart. And this is just a little example here of how you could do it. You can start with the actual URL, or you could put that at the end, whatever suits the group who are working together. Another column then for the actual discipline. Is it a geolocation exercise? Is it an exercise in analyzing the source of a video? Is it a debunk? Or is it, in fact, a combination of these? And you can then sort that column also. If you're in a spreadsheet, you can sort it to have all of those kind of ones together. Then what will be very helpful for everybody is if you can just have a little note on the key features, the things that helped to solve the particular challenge. This one, I just have a completely made up example here, but it says shop sign at 1 minute 27, tree at intersection, broken curb at 1 minute 48, so that anybody who has access to this spreadsheet does not have to go every time and solve a geolocation or other kind of challenge entirely by themselves. That there's something there, that it has the link to the material, it tells you what the material is all about, and you have an answer key provided to you there. Again, particularly useful if you are working together with a group of people whose paths and areas of operation are not crossing over, so that you don't end up duplicating the same material to the same people. But if you are working in mutually exclusive areas, this kind of thing can be really useful.
If I may just add on to that bit, Eoghan, I think the spreadsheet is a really great idea. And just about last week, we built one spreadsheet that I'll be sharing with everyone, where we have just like you've said in column B, discipline, where we have topic specific drop down menu, so you can choose the link that you're keying in is for photo verification or video or geo or social, just like you said. So anyone working on, say, a training can put their examples in here, and then others can make use of this. If I may just ask one thing here, so how do you suggest that we what's the way to avoid duplication here? Do we give like a brief of what the video is about? Do you think that would work?
Sorry, when you say to avoid duplication of
I mean,
exactly?
Same people putting in the same sort of examples.
Okay, well,
yeah.
I think one of the columns, of course, could be the caption or the title piece of content, or in the case of, say, something that didn't have a caption, like maybe a photo, a very clear description of it. I think, depending on the level of effort and time people are willing to put into something like this, I think there's also space for, if somebody finds out that one of these has been taken down or is not working, that they could either go in and take it out, or they could highlight a row in red or something, just so that people are aware that there's a problem. You could then, of course, reserve a further column for an explanation of why a person had marked something.
Right. I think the key is to sort of own this as a crowdsourced, stuff, so we can help each other.
Yeah.
One person.
And to come to an agreement on a very brief, simple set of rules or practices on how to use it, because things like this can take on life of their own and get unwieldy and complicated and unnecessarily complicated. So I think it's important that from the get-go, people have an idea of less than a dozen simple rules and practices on how to handle it.
Right.
So there is going to be existing material that the work has already been done on. And of course, this can be a huge help to you. Most of the people in this network are actually journalists who are working in existing news outlets. And surely there is a lot of this stuff being done already within there. So do check and monitor your own publication. Talk to workmates who are maybe not necessarily in the group. Ask them to give you a nice, easy heads up. Just if they say, oh, I did a story today and I verified this, just to let you know. Make it as easy as possible for them. Because there's going to be a huge mine of stuff here, mine of content and information. And it's a pity to let it go to waste. Now, the caveat I have put in here that it can make it too easy is because if you use, for example, say, verification challenge that did form part of a published story from your location, what happens very often in training workshops is the first thing they do is go straight to the search engine and search for it and end up at the news story explaining exactly how something was verified. So you need to keep that in mind. You can tell them no doing that, or depending on how advanced the group is, you can forbid it or not. Searching for something online using a search engine is not forbidden. It is a valid way of one of the steps toward verification. So you can just decide whether that's desirable or not and add or remove the material accordingly. Now, another way of using existing material is that there are lots of great examples out there. You have news organizations, you have other organizations, fact checkers and so on, who actually do put online examples of where they've done really good verification on things. Now, I think it's great. It's something that, there is a huge mine, there's a huge trove of stuff there, but I would say be very careful, be as ethical as possible in using anything like this. If it's something that's in the public domain, I would say, using it as a case study or whatever, that's okay, but just to make sure that you clearly attribute, providing perhaps a link where possible. Because if you're showcasing or spotlighting somebody else's work, I think that's a worthwhile thing to do. So give clear attribution, give clear credit, enable people to see the original. And also, when you're looking at something originally, do check the copyright, check if there's any indication whatsoever that the people or the organization who produced it may have any objection to it being republished or reused. Now, if it's something that you have seen somebody else using as actual training material or publishing on, say, a webinar or a webcast of their own training workshop, do not use that without getting express permission from the creator or the owner of that. I find a lot of people in this space are very generous with their time and their efforts and their material. The worst thing that can happen is that they can say, no, I don't want you to use that, fine, move on. But I have found some people occasionally surprisingly friendly and helpful when you ask them about something they've used. Some people are proud to have it reused, as long, again, as it is credited back to them and that people are allowed to see that it was their material in the first place. And just a little word on working live. I very, very often in workshops get asked, can we try this out in real time? And I'm happy to do so. It's quite exciting from time to time. But do be aware that things can and most likely will go wrong from time to time. It can be a great thrill for an audience, for a group of trainees to see something working in real time. But you have to think also that you have to think about what the point of this training session is. Is there certain stuff that you absolutely have to get across, and that if you don't do it in a controlled environment, it may not actually work? So you have to make sure that you get across the training objectives first of all. Then you can think about doing live stuff and giving people that extra little frisson of excitement of watching something happening in front of their eyes. Do be prepared for things to go wrong. Also be prepared to use things going wrong as a teachable moment. You know, you can explain these are free platforms. Sometimes they will not work the way they're supposed to. This is something that you need to know yourself in the future. And also, I think it's very important to know your audience. Are they the kind of audience who will accept that things will go wrong? This can be very closely linked to the amount of expertise or experience that they have. Because if you have a group of people who are complete novices and things go wrong, it can be discouraging for them. It can be disheartening and intimidating. And they may start to think things like, I'll never be able to do this because there are always going to be glitches and gremlins. Whereas a more experienced group who have maybe actually done a little bit of this kind of verification and fact-checking themselves know that it's an imperfect science. It's not a science at all, in fact. But they know that things are not going to work, and they will be much more amenable to you trying things out that may not necessarily work in the way that you expected them to. So try to be aware of this ahead of time, know their level of expertise, know even culturally, are they the kind of people who are happier when things are completely under control, or would they prefer a little bit of chance taking? So that's all I'm going to present directly to you. I'm very happy to take as many questions as there are now. This screen is just a link to my own website and details on how to contact me, because you may have a question that doesn't occur to you right now, but it might wake you up at 5 o'clock tomorrow morning, or you might think of it next week or days from now. I'm always open to people contacting me on this kind of stuff. You can contact me. There is a contact form on my website. That's the email address to use for me, and that's the related Twitter account. The direct messaging on that is open. You don't need me to be following you in order for you to message me. So I'll hand over for questions, or indeed, if any of you have any good suggestions on something maybe I didn't bring up there.
Thank you so much, Eoghan, for taking us through this very important session. I think we all, as OSINT trainers, verification and fact-checking trainers, would benefit from these tips. While we are waiting for our friends to share their questions with us, if I may just go back to the last
Yes.
bit that you just shared, where you mentioned about knowing your audience before the training. I think that's so key to delivering a good training. If you know the expertise level of your audience, you can tailor your material accordingly and give it that touch. I think that's key. I know you've been doing it personally. You've been sending us, some pre-training surveys to gauge, what's the expertise level of audience. So it
Yeah.
helps you immensely. I know it's not possible at all trainings for our trainers to do that, but from my experience, I have seen having a good conversation with the POC does help, a lot. So whenever you're doing a training, I think it helps to get in touch with the POC, try and get a sense of, how many, the majority of the participants, do they know the basics? Are they expecting advanced, level? And then accordingly treat your examples and resources and prep
Yeah,
them
I think it's
for it.
also important in that respect also, Surabhi, to be aware of different people's idea of what expertise entails. Because I have had places where, as you say, as you advise correctly, talk to the point of contact. And I have had places where people have said things like, yes, this is a really expert group. And that actually reflected that point of contact expertise more so than the reality of it. I've gone into groups where a certain amount of expertise was expected to be there, and it turned out to be far less. And that's not a reflection. That's not putting down a particular group, but it's just to realize that what you think and what I think and what a third party thinks is advanced could be very, very different. So that's why I say that things like a survey which has a questionnaire which has quite specific questions on it will always trump asking someone, are they expert or are they novice or so on.
I mean, we've seen that for multiple of our, trainings where sometimes the audience, if you haven't done that survey, it would surprise you because you wouldn't know their expertise, level. But if you know your audience well, you're more likely to, deliver a good training and to reach out to them much more concisely.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
again, in terms of that thing I said about, maybe doing a little bit of live work, it can be really important to know your audience, because I've had experiences, not just where things have gone wrong, but where they have gone unexpectedly and disastrously wrong. I once inadvertently ran a Twitter search live, which actually brought up pornography on the screen. Now, you want to be fairly sure that that doesn't happen to audiences in certain environments.
Which is where I think, when you said, setting the expectations right, like most people who've, worked on fact checking and verification know that, because a lot of tools are, you're making use of existing tools and doing, fact checking. They need not always, work fine. There will be days where they will change something suddenly, and you will be up for a surprise. So be prepared for that. I think that's key. And check, like you said, it's not just a couple, hours. We've seen a lot of our trainers in the network, and including you, I know, and spending just the night before the training, running through all the material that you have. So prepping for it well is really
I mean,
key.
the recent Facebook changes that caused such consternation throughout the whole fact checking and OSINT
Right.
community, they happened literally, I would say, somewhere between 6 and 12 hours after I finished a 3-day workshop. And the old ways of doing things had formed a couple of hours of that workshop. So this is where a network came in handy as well, that you were able to tell people quickly and tell everybody quickly, instead of having them all find out one by one, oh, that thing is now obsolete.
Right. And I can imagine a day after training what you've gone through, and those are big changes. And I know you'd written, about it, and in one of your posts, and we've shared that with our network, for them to know what to do next once those changes, have been put in place. Also, you talked about, some great examples, which sometimes we each, because we've taken them to say about 10 trainings, and we each to change them, only sometimes to replace it with, examples which aren't as effective. I know I've personally have, faced requests where some, of the audiences who've attended, say, one basic level and then, another level of training with me have requested me to share the same old example with them in the deck, because they found those were really very powerful. So, any instances where you've, had this, where you've had your audience come to you to say, hey, those examples, the previous ones that you'd shared were, really good. Can we get those?
Oh yeah, certainly. I've had people all over the region, all over the world, actually come back
I
and
do
say,
that too.
yeah, I had somebody recently ask me for 2 that I had used about 6 months ago, and they couldn't find them anywhere, and they said, oh, I really enjoyed those. I really learned a lot from them, and is it okay if I use them for my trainees? And absolutely, yes. The whole point of of picking out these particular examples was that they were very good for getting stuff across to people. So yeah, quite often I've had people come back and say, I know you used this 2 years ago, would it be okay to use it now? And I've looked at it and said, well, it teaches the principles really well. It's also maybe a dramatic photo or video, and it stays in people's minds. It embeds itself. At any time you've got that, as I said earlier, you know, to what extent does it serve the training objectives?
Right.
And if that is to a large extent, then it'll take quite a while to get old.
Right. These are those classic examples which will have all those interesting elements that you would want your audience to know. Of course, a hint of topical stuff, but there are some golden ones which you would want to retain, you know, in the stuff with you. So I think it's a good thing is to do like a balancing, you know, act, give topical relevant, but also don't let go of those key things.
The thing with this as well, it's something I talked about, you know, not falling into the familiarity trap, is that, like any field, this visual verification and so on is maturing, and there are obviously a number of fundamentals now that go right across and that will always be of use. So people have to remember, you know, if they're fundamentals, you're going to be telling people about them at every single workshop, and you might get really bored with them, but they're very important. It's like anything, like journalism, like fact-checking itself, like any field. There are certain things that will always hold true and always be relevant. So don't be afraid to put them across for the 120th time.
Right. And also going back to that, you know, collaboration, you know, through that spreadsheet, if I may just tell all our, you know, trainers and anyone who's joining us, you know, from any of our TOT programs, that I'll be sharing this doc with you, which will be like a spreadsheet where to begin with, we'll key in some examples, and then as you do your trainings, and if you spot any good examples that you think you would want to share with everyone, since a lot of you do put, you know, a lot of hard work before your trainings, I know you spend, you know, hours prepping your exercises and examples. So it could help all of us. A lot of it does happen on the WhatsApp group, but I know, as Eoghan says in the chat, sometimes it gets lost. For anyone to, you know, go back to it, it's quite a tedious task to find it. So I'll share that spreadsheet sometime next week, wherein we can have like a collation of some examples from some trainers to begin with, and then we can keep updating that. Well, I think we, you know, that's it for now. Do we have? Yep. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us for this session. We hope to come back to you with another Factually Your session with the very awesome Eoghan Sweeney very soon, and we'll get back to you, you know, with the date and the topic on that for you to register for it. Thank you, Eoghan, for leading this awesome session.
If anybody does, if any questions do occur to people later on related to this topic or indeed any other topic, please feel free to get in touch.
Totally, and we know that we have Eoghan always present on our WhatsApp group to cater to all our questions and any asks that we have.
I would say if you have any specific questions for me in the WhatsApp group, please at me. Because of the time difference, I have my push notifications turned off.
Right, and with the very many WhatsApp groups that we have, though we've narrowed it down for you Eoghan now. Right. Yeah. Thank you, Surbhi and Shivani, for joining us as well. Thanks, everyone. Hope you have a great evening.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Surbhi. Thank you, Eoghan. That was wonderful. That was really nice of you, and I'm sure that our great TOT group would gain a lot out of it. Like Surbhi said, that we will send you the sheet next week. And in case you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with us. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you, Eoghan. Thank you so much. Thank you.